Georgia down to exposing the fraud of 2020 in Georgia and when it comes to ensuring honest and fair elections going forward. You know that Kemp certified his own election against Stacey Abrams in 2018. Stacey Abrams said she thought that her election was fraudulent. She felt that she did not get a fair election. I campaigned for Attorney General in Georgia in 2022. I do not allege that I was cheated out of the office. I think that I do, in my heart of heart and in my brain, I believe that I lost to Chris Carr. Why? Because the I is very important and very significant for any candidate running for election. What are you talking about, John? The I, what is the I? That's that letter that appears after his name on the ballot, signifying that they are an incumbent. That is politically the most strong medicine you can have when you're running for reelection to an office. And I think I lost to the incumbent. Do I think that I lost by the margin that was represented? No, I don't. Now, more significantly, Brad Raffensperger also certified his election. And the point that I'm trying to get to, folks, is that I campaigned throughout the state from the very most northern sections of the state, north of Rome, all the Dahlonega, Dalton, over into Clayton, all the way down to St. Mary's and Bainbridge and points in between. I found one kid at the University of Georgia who had anything remotely nice to say about Brad Raffensperger. Who ran against Jody Heist, TJ, the sheriff down in Twiggs County or somewhere down in there. And then David Belle-Isle, who just lost by a few votes to Raffensperger in 2018. Although we are to believe that Raffensperger won by 2 points without a runoff. I do not believe it. But he certified his own election. So there you have it. I don't believe that he won without a runoff based on the experience that I had in talking to over 10,000 Georgians, and one person had anything good to say about him. These were Republicans that would have voted in the primary. All right. Well, we'll see how it plays out. I predict the judge is going to do the right thing. He did say, and this is where my source of encouragement comes from. He did say just yesterday, I only have to find an appearance of impropriety or a conflict of interest to disqualify the DA. I hope that is foreboding, and we will just have to see how it in fact plays out. All right, so Hunter Biden appeared before Congress this week. It's been a long time in the making, but he did appear before Congress this week in the Joe Biden impeachment hearings. He testified behind closed doors, but under oath. And here's what Jamie Comer had to say after the testimony. Absolutely staggering, absolutely dumbfounding that here's a guy that is being alleged to have taken in $30 million in bribes from our adversaries, and the populace of the United States don't seem to care. That is the most discouraging part of it. And then I asked myself, well, why do the American people not seem to care? I think that the people who listen to The Truth with John Gordon care. I think the people who listen to John Fredericks every morning from 6 to 10 on this network, I think they care. I think the people that watch Fox News care because they are being informed. Those news outlets are being transparent. I would put the New York Post in that category. But the New York Times, CNN, and MSNBC, I call it MSNBS, they subvert, they cover up, they twist, they don't tell you the truth. In fact, they tell you lies. They tell you that there is no evidence of Biden's wrongdoing. They tell you that the by Fox are just right-wing MAGA Republican propaganda. Well, they're not. They've got hard, cold truth. 20 LLCs, allegations of $30 to $60 million in bribes from our adversaries, not even from our allies. Either one is illegal without proper disclosure, and it's just the worst corruption I've ever seen or heard of in American political history, and it's falling on deaf ears. And I think that the elite government, i.e., the bureaucrats, are also covering it up. They want to make Biden's cognitive ability the issue. That's a subject on which people can differ. The White House press secretary said that he went and got a physical and was rendered qualified to serve. And that in itself is just a joke. Well, we have a great guest with us today. And this gentleman and I do not know each other well, but we're getting to know each other. And we're also very much aligned in how we feel like we need to go forward to save America. His name is K. Carl Smith. He's from Alabama. He's an activist. He's an author. And he wants to help African Americans realize that they have been held captive by the Democratic Party, that the things that they have been told for the last 50 years basically are lies. That the Republican Party truly is the party of Lincoln. And we want to reach black voters and help expose the truth, help expose them to the truth. K. Carl, welcome to The Truth.
Hey, thank you so much, John. I appreciate it. Enjoy being on the show with you.
Well, you and I had the opportunity to chat for 5 or 10 minutes earlier this week on the phone, and I was just so impressed with what you're doing and what you're the way that you are presenting this. And why don't you share that with our audience? Start with the book that you've written and the talk track that you are bringing to the American people all across the country, particularly on the East Coast, and you're starting a Florida book tour this week, I believe.
Yeah, I'm in Florida now. I'm in Jacksonville as we speak.
Well, we're just a few 100 miles away. Come on down. I'll buy you a beer.
Yeah. So this is actually my second book that I wrote. The first book that I wrote came out in 2013, is entitled Frederick Douglass Republicans: The Movement to Reignite America's Passion for Liberty. The book you're referring to, just released 2 months ago, it is entitled Telling Conservatives the Truth, and the subtitle is Leveraging the Life Empowering Values of Frederick Douglass to Save America. So the book, it is not a dissertation on the political thoughts of Douglass, but what it is a liberty messenger handbook. It teaches you and empowers you how to become a better messenger of liberty, how to have conversations and not confrontations in order to change hearts and minds. So it's a message that really embraces and connects with all Americans, but especially Black Americans. So it's a broad audience. It's not just blacks. It's everyone, even those who've been indoctrinated into Marxism, how to change their hearts and minds and how to awaken within them a sense of liberty because of this indoctrination that they're having, and it's hurting our country.
We're talking to K. Carl Smith. He's an activist. He is an author, a civil rights proponent, but with a different spin than the black leadership in the country have put out for the last 50 years. Really, I continue to say, K. Carl, that I know so many black people, especially in Atlanta. And hundreds by their first name in the inner city where I've worked since 2006.
Mm-hmm.
And I consider them my friends. And they are the nicest, hardest working, God-fearing people that go to church every Sunday, and I just find them to be such wonderful people with a great optimistic spirit, even though they're living in the midst of poverty, crime, and desperation. It truly is inspiring. But I don't think that the black leadership represents that group of people at all. So what's it about? Why did the black leadership of this country appear to want to keep black people, as Candace Owens would say, and I don't know if you agree with it or not, but basically in abject poverty? It seems it's intentional at this point.
Yeah. These black leaders you're referring to, I call them self-appointed black leaders because we never had an election in the black community to decide who's going to be our leader. They just have emerged, and the media has prompted them. I'm talking about the Jesse Jackson, the Al Sharptons. We never had an election to uh, to call them our leader, but because of the left wing media, that's who they make prominent in the black community, and so people think they are our leaders, but they're not. Um, what's going on? And first of all, let me say this: I grew up in Alabama. I grew up as a staunch Democrat. So as I became older and learned more about the different political ideologies, I realized that my values were more aligned with conservatism. But also, I realized when I did that, and this is the reason why you see a lot of blacks they still vote Democrat, is because number one, the brand of conservatism is so bad. In the black community, the word conservative does not mean or resonate with being liberty. The word conservative has a racist connotation. So right there in the beginning, that's the problem. We may think of the word of conservative being okay, but when you want to engage the black community, that word does not carry the same meaning because that word has been redefined by the left and therefore has a racist connotation. Let me give you an example. If you identify yourself as a black conservative or a Christian conservative or Reagan conservative, that's what you're saying, but what people are hearing is you're you're black conservative, you're black racist. You're a Reagan conservative, you're a Reagan racist. Even if you identify yourself as a constitutional conservative, now you are a racist because they demonize the word what? Constitution as well. So that's the first step in identifying how we're going to turn things around. We got a brand problem, and what I contend, I talk about in my book, we have to stop using the word conservative because that's not going to take us to victory. Because we're in the mess we're in now because we're using a word that has a negative connotation, not just in the black community, but because of the negative, because of left wing mainstream media. Now, young children today, when they go off to college and come back home, they come back as little socialists and they call their conservative parents and grandparents racist. They've been
Well,
taught as well the word conservative means a Nazi or racist. So we got a brand problem. We got
all
to
right.
fix
Well,
that brand problem.
let's go all the way back to the beginning of slavery and race in this country. And
Mhm.
if I understand correctly, you kind of point to James Douglas as the founder of the uh, civil rights movement in America, and we're talking about going all the way back to the 1800s, correct?
Frederick Douglass. Yes,
Frederick
Frederick
Douglass. Well,
Douglass.
I don't know what I said.
Yeah.
I'm old, but Frederick Douglass, of course.
Mhm.
So tell us about Frederick Douglass, and
Yeah, let me
you
give you
you
the
also give a stark contrast for him to Karl Marx, and I'd like you to share that with our
yeah.
listeners as well.
And I want to say that everything that I'm saying right now on your show is in my book in detail. So if I don't get a chance to really dive into it and go more in depth in the book, it's all detail. So quick class on Frederick Douglass, if you will. He was born 1818 in the Eastern Shores area of Maryland. The way I like to put it, since Douglass was born into slavery, he was born below poverty. He was a slave for the first 20 years of his life. Never slept in bed to age 8, never owned a pair of shoes to age 10. He was homeschooled, self taught, because you remember that was against the law to teach blacks how to read and write. Well, Frederick Douglass started his own homeschooling program. He befriended some of the white kids in the big house, and they taught him how to read and write. And Douglass took it from there. Kind of fast forward a little bit. At the age of 20, Douglas escaped from slavery on his second attempt. And keep in mind now, Douglas had 0 days of formal schooling. Never been to school in his life, all homeschooled. Frederick Douglass was an author of 3 autobiographies. He didn't have a ghostwriter. He wrote 3 autobiographies. I don't know anybody in history that has 3 autobiographies, but Douglass has 3 autobiographies covering different segments and time frames in his life. Frederick Douglass was an advisor to 5 Republican presidents. Let me go through them right quickly. Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, James Garfield, Rutherford Hayes, and Benjamin Harrison. Most folks don't get a chance to meet one president. Frederick Douglass was an advisor to 5 U.S. presidents. Now, here's a trivia question for you. Frederick Douglass passed away in 1895. He died of a massive heart attack. At the time of his death, Frederick Douglass had $300,000 in savings, which is more than $10 million today. So Douglass's life is, in fact, inspiring. And the way, because what he was able to achieve by starting in slavery, no one today can out-victimize Frederick Douglass. So therefore, you're going to look at his action plan for success, because whatever action plan that worked for a slave can work for a free person today if we apply ourselves. Douglass was an avid reader. He took education seriously, and he had a work ethic, a strong work ethic. Those are the things, if we apply ourselves today, regardless of the racism that's supposed to be out there, you can overcome that. And that's what Douglass's life teaches us. But John, most powerful thing about Douglass, I think, is not just his life story, but the literary legacy he left behind to help us today deal with some of the challenges we're facing. Douglass, in my view, is America's greatest writer, thinker, speaker, thought leader when it comes to liberty and the U.S. Constitution. He wrote about free speech, the importance of free speech. He wrote about the importance of the Constitution. He wrote about religious liberty, the right of people keep and bear arms, parental school choice, legal immigration. All the things that we're dealing with today, Frederick Douglass wrote and spoke about them. That's important because, in my personal opinion, you cannot win an argument with a runaway slave about his admiration of the founding fathers, his respect for his Constitution, and all those other values that I just mentioned. We call them values. We don't call them issues. They're values because issues divide, values unite. Douglass spoke about them. And when you leverage what this former slave has to say, that's how you have an awakening. And you mentioned about Karl Marx and Frederick Douglass. And again, this is in detail in my book. Matter of fact, there's an illustration where I contrast the lives of Frederick Douglass and Karl Marx. Let me quickly go through that. Both Karl Marx and Frederick Douglass were born in 1818. Karl Marx was born in Germany, never had a real job in his life. His father was a lawyer. He came from a very affluent family. He attended private schools. Okay. He married into money. His wife came from a successful business family, and she took care of her husband because Karl Marx really didn't work. And his business partner, Frederick Engels, supported him financially. On the other hand, Frederick Douglass, of course, born in 1818 into slavery. He was homeschooled, self-taught. Douglass was separated from his mother at birth, and she worked 12 miles away where Douglass was being brought up. And Douglass's father was alleged. The thought was that Douglass's father was his slave master who put him in slavery. So Karl Marx, a poster child for white privilege. Frederick Douglass, born into slavery, oppression. Karl Marx later became a theorist about oppression. He wrote about things that he never experienced. Frederick Douglass had real life experiences about oppression. He was a slave for 20 years. Karl Marx was an atheist. Frederick Douglass was an ordained Christian AME Zion preacher. People who study Karl Marx, they become revolutionists. They want to tear everything up, shred the Constitution, start over. Douglass said in his third autobiography, he said, "I am a reformer." And basically what they're saying to me is, let's keep the best that we have, including the Constitution, and make things better. And
Well,
then Karl Marx died in abject poverty.
that is a
Frederick Douglass
fascinating walk
died
down
equivalent of
the
a 1%er.
fabulous history lesson, and we appreciate it so much. K. Carl Smith, we're here on the John Fredericks Media Network, broadcasting from West Palm Beach today across the network in Atlanta, Norfolk, Richmond, Philadelphia, Nashville, and Pittsburgh, and our newest affiliates in the state of West Virginia, where we now blanket the state. You can also listen to us every Saturday on Getter.com. We're there right now live, and we're also on Rumble and YouTube live. We're talking to K. Carl Smith. He's the author of Frederick Douglass Republicans. K. Carl, Douglass was really, it sounds to me, way ahead of his time. He would be a thought leader and an opinion leader were he alive today, based on what you're telling us. Would you agree?
Well, I think he is one. He's not treated that way. I mean, let's go back to the time when he was in slavery. So Douglass started speaking on the abolitionist movement. He became a spokesperson because he was so articulate. When William Lloyd Garrison asked him to speak, William Lloyd Garrison immediately hired him to be a spokesperson. So it got to a point where Douglass was telling this story. And then one time, Douglass started becoming more philosophical about what slavery is all about, slave master mindset, what was going on. William Lloyd Garrison and the other speakers said, wait a minute, Freddie. People don't want to know how you think. Just tell your story. They don't know what you think. Just tell your story. Douglass said, I got something to say. And then later, Douglass broke away, started his own newspaper, because at that time, they didn't treat Douglass like he was a major thought leader. And to me, if we didn't have the literary legacy of Frederick Douglass, I think we will lose this nation, because Frederick Douglassism is the most effective liberty message to defeat Marxism. We just got to be wise enough to leverage it. And that's what the book is all about.
We'd be happy to take your calls today. Call us at 804-778-8888. And I know that K. Carl would love to hear from you and engage with you. So it's just astounding to me that when you look at our country today, blacks, Asians, Hispanics tend to lean left, tend to vote Democratic. Jewish members of the Jewish faith seem to reflexively vote Democratic. And then suburban housewives. The fact of the matter is, I think that to some extent, suburban housewives are the only group of people I really kind of understand why they would vote Democratic, based solely on the abortion issue, if nothing else. But the Republican Party is the party of Lincoln. The Republican Party under Trump employed more African Americans than in the history of our country. The Republican Party has brought prosperity, peace, lower crime, all of the things that I've been informed Black people really care about. And I think that this depiction of that we get in the news media and that we hear from Black leadership is just a completely false picture about Black people in America today. The race awareness course I took 10 years ago informed me that for the most part, Black people are conservative, they are Christian, they go to houses of worship every Sunday, they believe in the family, and the media seem to focus on the exceptions to those classifications. Do you think that we really have been sold a bill of goods, and that Blacks in particular have been basically lied to about which party is really on their side? And more importantly, how do we change it? How are we going to change this dynamic?
Some of that is true. You really have to, when I say that the Republican Party and conservatives have a brand problem, that's something we got to really think about and take seriously, because think about it. The brand problem is this, that conservatives are racist, okay? In the Black community, racism is paramount. So if you have a brand problem and your brand problem is that I think you're racist, I don't care what statistics you talk about, what evidence you provide, what truth you bring, you're not coming from a position of trust and credibility. So therefore, I'm not going to listen to what you have to say, because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking you're a racist, and that's the ultimate importance for me. And I'm talking when I was a Democrat, that was serious. I mean, so a racist, there's nothing a racist or an Uncle Tom can tell me. So what has to happen, what we got to do first, to answer the second part of your question, we must understand we got a brand problem. We got to stop using the word conservative. Doesn't work. Rush Limbaugh agreed with me on in 2018 about the word conservative. And so we got to come up with another way to identify ourselves. What I've been advocating for the past 15 years, the most effective moniker we could use to identify ourselves to help us trump the race card and have conversations and change hearts and minds is the moniker Frederick Douglass Republican. And
Well,
we've
and
been,
that is the title of your book, K. Carl Smith, who's written that book and is now on a book tour around Florida. But you're not promoting that book, right? You're promoting your book called The Truth. Is that right?
yeah, Frederick Douglass Republicans, the
Telling the
first book.
truth.
This book is entitled Telling Conservatives the Truth, which has in it some elements of the first book. The second book is I think I did a deep dive, total brain dump, laid out the strategy. How do you use the engagement strategy and setting up? How do we get in this position in the beginning with the word conservative has a racist connotation, not just in the Black community, but across the nation? And how do we overcome it? The way we overcome it, we got to leverage the liberty message and the history of Frederick Douglass. He's the game changer.
Speaking to groups, and I would imagine that is the message that you're delivering. What's the reception? What are you hearing out in the field?
Oh, people love it. I don't care if you're talking to a predominantly Black church. Now, when I go to a predominantly Black church or when I get invited to an NAACP meeting, I don't use the word conservative. I quickly let them know that I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican. And at times when I articulated that and shared that with them, I get a standing ovation because they share the same values. And let me say this, a Frederick Douglass Republican, to become a Frederick Douglass Republican, it's not based on your skin color. It's based on what we call the life empowering values of Frederick Douglass. If you agree with 80% of these values that I'm going to go through quickly, that makes you a Frederick Douglass Republican. What are some of those values? Respect for the U.S. Constitution, respect for the U.S. Constitution, respect for life, the belief in the limited power of government, where I like to keep more of the money that I make. The belief in personal responsibility comes out of 2 Thessalonians. If a man doesn't work, he shouldn't eat. Thus, free speech, religious liberty, the right of people keep and bear arms, the right to vote. These are the values that Douglass wrote and spoke about. And you may say, though, those are conservative values. Well, we don't use the word conservative. They're life empowering values.
I would say those are American values.
That's right. That's right. They are.
That's what I would like. And I did, as we were talking on the phone the other day, I shared that Newt Gingrich has been a friend of mine for 40 years. We're not best pals. We don't talk every day or every week, but we've had a nice relationship. And I formed a 501c4 called Turn USA Red, which I've shared with our viewers before. And we are specifically targeting Blacks, Asians, Hispanics, suburban housewives, and millennials to help inform them that the Republicans are the party of Lincoln, that we are Frederick Douglass Republicans. I haven't used that as part of my talk track until now, but I will start using it. And Speaker Gingrich told me, he said, the messages are pretty obvious. The way that you deliver the message is the hard part. And I think that you really have broken the code on that. Rather than talking about becoming conservative, how about just becoming Frederick Douglass Republicans, or how about becoming embracing American values?
Exactly right. Hey, John, let me share this with you. So your audience can really get excited when I share this. The Frederick Douglass Republican Engagement Strategy, that's what we call it. It's a persuasive messaging model. It's based on the liberty message of Frederick Douglass, the diversity outreach strategy of the Apostle Paul, and the outreach ministry of Jesus Christ. Let me just focus on Paul for a minute. Now, this is in my book in detail now. I'm just going to go over it quickly. So before the Apostle Paul became a champion of Christianity, he was well known for being a bloodthirsty and persecutor of the Christians. And that reputation preceded him. Okay? Remember, God called Paul to take the gospel to the Gentiles, people of different ethnicities? Well, you really think about it, the Apostle Paul, he was a diversity outreach specialist. In order to have an impact in the early growth of the church like he did, Paul had to overcome the negative perception that the Gentiles had of him. In essence, he had to trump the race card. There are three concepts that Paul embraced to help him improve his brand, improve his image. And these are the things that conservatives need to take note of, because we got a brand problem too. What the first thing Paul did to improve his brand, he had a name change. He went from Saul to Paul because the word Saul carried a negative connotation. The word Paul was more appealing to the Gentiles. The word conservative carries a racist connotation. The name Frederick Douglass is more appealing to Americans. You follow me? And then when you put the word Republican with Frederick Douglass's name, now you created an oxymoron. Frederick Douglass, an icon of liberty, Republican because of the negative propaganda, icon of racism. The two don't go together. But when you put the two together, you create an oxymoron. And when you say that phrase, you just create a mystery in the other person's mind, and now they will know what you're talking about. That's when you got to have content, John, to come behind the phrase to seize control of the narrative and start changing hearts and minds.
Powerful thoughts, powerful words, powerful strategy. We've got Andrea on the line from Atlanta. Andrea, welcome to The Truth.
Hi. Thank you so much, John, and your wonderful guest. I really want to offer some strong thoughts. First of all, I just commend him, and what he generates, I think, is the most important thing we need in the world today, which is trust. I think trust is fundamental to any kind of progress and happiness. I have been involved in civil rights movements for decades, a long time, and have supported African American candidates in my home as well. And I want to offer this maybe as help, that those who know history know that the left and Marxists made a class that they call the useful innocents, and there's another word there, useful something else. And I think that in America they have focused on the African American community as their first useful innocence. Herman Cain even wrote a book, They Think You're Stupid, which if your guest has read, he might enjoy just glancing at that. But I think that what we really need to feel is that we can trust one another despite any cultural differences, which I find colorful and interesting in life.
Okay, Carl, I think Andrea, excuse me for interrupting. The clock is moving fast this afternoon. Let me just interrupt you for a minute and let's get Carl to weigh in on that. I've said on this show many times before that I think that to Andrea's point, that one of the most disappointing parts of our current government is the absolute failure of so many of the institutions that we, for so many years, just trusted. The FBI, the CIA, the Congress of the United States. I mean, I love the rhetoric. I'm ready for them to start acting. And you've got a president that is seated in the White House that seems to prefer to tell lies than the truth. Is Andrea right? I mean, don't you think that we have really lost a lot of trust in people being willing to tell us the truth?
I couldn't hear any of her comments. I'm just going to comment based on the whole thing about the institution. But based on what you just said, the answer is definitely yes. And what I've learned is we can no longer rely on our social institutions to promote our founding principles. We can't rely on government. We can't rely on education. And even some churches, we can't rely on them because they have been taken over by the left. You have churches now who are woke. So they're not espousing the value that Frederick Douglass talked about, that he embraced. So you're definitely right. So to me, the last line of defense is supposed to be those social institutions. They're gone. They're gone away. They don't embrace the founding principles anymore. So the last line of defense, in my view, are conservative parents and grandparents. We're the last line of defense. So therefore, we got to become better messengers of liberty so we can engage our children and our friends about the importance of liberty, about the importance of the Constitution. We can't rely on the social institutions anymore. So the book is all about empowering liberty-minded people to become better messengers of liberty by embracing the liberty message of Frederick Douglass and how he did it.
So this is we always make our guest our phone guest a priority. We've got Keith. He's been holding patiently from Portsmouth. Keith, welcome to The Truth. And I'll relay the question to you, K. Carl, if you can't hear it.
Okay, thank you, John. And can you hear me, Carl?
I don't think K. Carl can hear you, but I'll relay it to him if you'll give us a
question.
Sure.
I'll distill it down to this. I have some other comments, but aren't 100% of black Democrats actually all Uncle Toms?
So I don't really understand where you're coming from with that, but
Well, I'd like to just ask him
Keith wants to know.
He could relay it.
All right, so
100% of all black Democrats, Uncle Tom.
Keith wants to know if aren't 100% of Democrats Uncle Toms. I'm not sure I get the question, but he asked you to respond to it.
I don't.
Black Democrats. 100% of black Democrats, are they Uncle Toms? I'm not sure what that
Yeah,
means.
he got to expound more on that. I'm not following that. I don't want you to assume anything here. Unless he's saying 100% of black Republicans are Uncle Toms.
No. Because as you understand what the Democrat Party is all about and what the Democrat Party has in fact done to blacks and the black community, okay, it basically, it's not just the black leaders, but it's all who vote for blacks, all blacks who vote for Democrats that are treacherous to their own people. They betray their own people by doing things that are detrimental to blacks.
So Keith's really just making the point, K. Carl, and I think that we talked about it earlier, that the Democratic Party, which has appealed to blacks for the last 50 years, has to some extent left them in poverty, have not really given them the freedom that they would that blacks would hope and expect for, and to some extent have maintained them as a somewhat of a captive audience for the Democratic Party. Is that a fair representation, Keith?
There's some truth. Yeah, I was a staunch Democrat growing up in Alabama. And so there's no perfect party. And the Republican Party is definitely not perfect. So what I learned is you have to grow what God has planted you and become the salt of that organization and speak truth. The purpose of my book is not trying to get people to become Republicans, especially black people. I'm trying to encourage people to vote their values, no matter where they are. And there's a quote from Robert Brown Elliott, who was one of the first 7 black Republicans to serve in Congress. He said on one occasion, "I am a slave to principles. I call no party master. I'm a slave to Christian principles. I don't call the Republican Party or the Democrat Party my master. I'm a vote in a way that shows my love and my allegiance to the God I serve without compromise." So that's what
I
it's
think that's
all
well
about.
said, K. Carl. I think the labels of Democrat, Republican, Libertarian do us as much disservice as anything. I think that it would suit me if people ran as everybody ran as independents and they espoused their beliefs. I think that there is just a lack of awareness by so many people in our electoral system today about the truth and the real issues, because they get snippets, they get sound bites from the mainstream media, and they have been conditioned to believe what they are told, and so they make kind of superficial draw superficial conclusions and vote accordingly. Therein is a problem that I don't think we're going to be able to solve today or anytime soon, but I think it is
John,
reality.
One of the reasons why I left the Democrat Party, I got tired of people telling me I'm a victim when the Bible tells me I'm more than a conqueror. and I got tired of being lied to. When I found out they were lying to me about one thing, I said, what else have they lied to me about? And I revealed all kind of lies. Let me give you an example. What woke me up? I'm a graduate of Historical Black College, Alabama A&M University. I was taught in college that the 3/5 clause in the Constitution meant that blacks are 3/5 of a human being. It was Frederick Douglass who turned my thinking right side up. And when he wrote about the 3/5 clause, and that's in the book. The other thing is, if you go to the Democrat Party's website right now, you scroll down to the bottom on the homepage, and you click on Our History. The first part of the first sentence reads this, and I quote, "For more than 200 years, we have led the fight for civil rights." If you know a little bit of your history, you know the Democrat Party was anti-black, anti-civil rights for the entire 19th century and into the 20th century. That's a lie. Now, if they're saying they supported civil rights, it wasn't black folks. It must have been the white slave masters.
Well, I certainly hope that your message resonates. Belief in the Constitution, life, limited government, personal responsibility, free speech, liberty, the right to bear arms, and the right to vote. Those are values that I would hope that every American could agree to. They are the foundational principles of our country and our government. And it's just been a pleasure having K. Carl Smith on The Truth Today. He's the author of 2 books, Frederick Douglass Republicans and Telling Conservatives the Truth. And he's on a book tour. Where can people see you in Jacksonville?
Well, tonight is going to be a private meeting. I'm speaking to a think tank. So that's not open to the public. I'm actually doing some training with them.
Do you have any
But
book
I will
signings
say-
while you're in Jacksonville?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a book signing in Jacksonville that people could find you?
Not this trip.
Tell us.
I'll be in Texas next week. I'm coming back to Florida in the first week of April, and I'll put that on the website. Let me give you my website.
Yeah, tell us where we can find you and where people can buy your book.
Yeah. It's K. Carl. Let me spell it for you. KCARLINC.com.
There you go.
KCarlinc.com. And I encourage your audience, when you go to the website, scroll down and listen to that Rush Limbaugh audio. It's about a minute long, where Rush agrees with me about stop using the word conservative.
Well, we're telling you the truth here today on the John Fredericks Media Network. It's a pleasure to have K. Carl Smith with us. Thank you for your time. Come see us in West Palm Beach. I'd love to meet you. And we are telling you the truth right here today. I'm John Gordon. Join us next Saturday at high noon. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you, K. Carl.
Summers, but I never